Robert Carrier is well known throughout the world as a restaurateur and writer on food. He cooks for the sheer fun of it. He'll enthuse about food for hours, maintaining that good cooking is no secret and that anyone can share its pleasures.
You can wine her and dine her and over hors d'oeuvre. As you summon the wine, you can summon the nerve to ask her the questions you'd never dare, like whether she'd like moule marinière. Food is the music of love, play on. Food is the music of love. Food is the music of love, play on. Food is the music of love.
You know, we restaurateurs are funny people and we see many, many strange things. Sometimes when a young couple comes in and they're rather gauche and this is their first time there and they're looking for reassurance. And as the warmth of the wines, as the pleasure of the food, as the warm ambiance hits them, you know that everything's going to be all right.
Premarital Chateaubriand is a must if two people are trying to learn how to trust. And you'll find how to solve all the problems you get when she hates aubergine, but you both love courgette. Food is the music of love, play on. Food is the music of love. As the candles burn lower, you offer your soul, and you set the right mood with Profitero. The evening's complete, there's just one thing to say with a stiff upper lip. L'addition, s'il vous plaît. Food is the music of love, play on. Food is the music of love. Food is the music of love, play on. Food is the music of love.
Explain it all to you. You'll like it. Look at that.
No, but John, you should never let me have it. Oh, I made it fun.
There are basic hungers in life. For food, for sustenance, for friendship, and for love. Like friendship, I think food is a warming, exciting, satisfying thing.
Very good, Terry, but could you put a bit more brandy in there? Just a tiny bit.
Allez, allez!
Allez, allez! Un géant, le géant des mers, là.
Ils sont bien, ils sont comme moi, vous voyez, ils sont pas mal.
Brillat Savarin, the great gastronome of the 18th century, once said, "Tell me what you eat, and I will tell you what you are." He, of course, was thinking of the class distinctions which are revealed by a man's choice of food. But it goes much deeper than that. We really are what we eat. The proteins, the vitamins, the amino acids, the minerals, they actually build our bodies and our minds and make us what we are in our personality, our way of life, and in our way of loving. The French are very fond of equating food with love. I've often heard them say, "Tell me a pleasure that we can enjoy 3 times a day, every single day of our lives, without getting tired of it." I've also heard them say, and this is usually some old man at the bar of some little restaurant, "Name another pleasure, Bob, like eating, that goes on and on after all the other pleasures have gone." We never get tired of eating. Perhaps twice a week, we can have a fabulous meal that'll make us dream and make us remember and fill us with warmth and satisfaction. That's what eating's all about. Here we are, old, tired businessmen eating away a marvelous meal with the candles and everything. But in the old days, it wasn't used for that at all. It was used for love. You didn't bring your wife here in this wonderful little room with all its...
Why not your wife?
Well, you're not supposed to make love with your wife. That's défendu, you know that. I think my 5.5 years of living in France influenced me food-wise more than anything else in my life. All of the style of eating that we enjoy today in the restaurants in this country, and in France particularly, was brought to perfection in the early 19th century in France and Paris in the restaurants there. Great restaurants like this one, with their cabinet particulier, where one could go and have a dinner alone with just the person of your choice, just the two of you, waited on with almost unseen hands, bringing you your dishes so that you, and you alone, were the king and queen of that tiny room. Here you could eat divinely well, and if the mood took you after a bit of champagne and after a wonderful meal, then, screened from the world, you could love divinely too. Mr. Felix Topolinsky, whose family has owned La Pérouse for generations, is a bon vivant, with decided views on the subjects of food and love.
Mr. Topolinsky, do you think that food helps in love? Une ambiance, la nourriture et tout ça, ça aide beaucoup à l'amour?
Oui, l'ambiance.
L'ambiance plus que l'amour.
L'ambiance, on dit que the mood. The mood.
Yes.
L'ambiance is the mood. Yes, it's very good for the mood.
Let's make a toast to the things you like best in life.
The things I like best of life is love, love, and love. And to finish with soufflé breton.
Oh, I love it. I'll take that.
I think a child first learns mainly through food and through his desire to feed himself and to live. I think he learns from his mother, first of all at her breast, of this need for nourishment, this need for understanding, and this need for love. It's all connected in a funny way with food, because that's what she's giving him when she gives him her first nourishment. She's giving him her love. I remember as a child I had a marvelous appetite. I always loved to eat. But many of my little friends didn't, so I used to be invited to lunch so that Harry or Betty or Jimmy would eat up all their spinach like I did. A lunch with a family and friends, all relaxed and easy, has a lot to offer, I think. It's a personal ritual that binds family life together and gives it stability, especially when everybody's involved.
Yes, look at that. Look at that then.
Coming to lunch with my friends the Cleverleys and the boys always brings back memories of my childhood. Ooh. See all the water coming off now? Can you do that then? Try that with the next one.
When I was 6, a very traumatic thing happened to America. In 1929 came the great crash. And we'd always led a very comfortable life in my family. We had a 14-room house and a great estate and servants. And all of a sudden, my mother and her 3 sons and her husband were left without anything. They'd invested badly, as many people in America did. And instead of being very downcast by it all, she was rather marvelous about it. And she made all the boys, my 2 brothers and myself, help. My job was to wash the lettuce and dry each leaf, leaf by leaf, and to set the table. And we used to set it for the family, for the 5 of us and a guest or 2, or whoever we had, as if it were a party all the time. We were all in this great kitchen. It was a very nostalgic place. One of the nicest memories for a child in life is the warmth of a kitchen, the smells of a cake baking, of bread baking. I feel sorry for kids today whose mothers only make frozen foods or make a cake out of a cake mix.
That's terrific.
During Prohibition, when the sale of alcohol and its consumption was forbidden by law, rum runners used to come down the Hudson River where we had our house in Tarrytown, 25 miles from New York City, and they'd be caught by the local police, our own harbor police. And they used to throw over their champagne and their caviar into the water so that they'd be innocent, of course, and there'd be no evidence. My elder brother and his friends used to go out in their boats in the mornings with grappling hooks and get cases of champagne and cases of caviar. And I remember my father, who was a judge and a lawyer, turning an absolute blind eye to this, honest judge that he was. And so we used to have all through the Prohibition marvelous wines and champagnes, thanks to the industry of my brother and his friends.
How about that, Jess? You know what that's got in it? It's got wine. It's got brandy. It's got onions, it's got bacon.
I remember various friends of mine and the things they liked and how they weren't allowed a dessert or a sweet unless they'd eaten up all their meat. I never had any of this problem. And I think it's mainly because everyone in my family enjoyed their food. Also, I think it was because we were treated as adults. We were allowed to participate. We were allowed to say what we liked and what we didn't like.
Because if you leave a messy plate, you'll have salad and gravy.
My mother always said that when you're cooking for someone and having them home at your own table, you're actually giving a part of yourself. So she would have loved this place, Hintlesham Hall, my new house in Suffolk, because it's both a home and a restaurant. I've always wanted to create the kind of great house that's open to the public, for lunch and for dinner, and for musical evenings and balls. Like a French chateau, in fact, and Hintlesham seemed to be the perfect setting for it. I remember when I first saw it, it was all lit like it is today, absolutely solid gold by the sun. And that's why I painted it this color, this golden apricot, because I tried to recreate that. My mother always loved parties and entertaining, and if you just mentioned a party to her, her eyes would sparkle and she'd put on her newest dress and would be all ready to enjoy herself. My father didn't like parties because he was more of an introverted person. He loved smoking his pipes and he loved gardening. He loved fishing and he loved reading more than anything else.
One of the sad things that I remember was that he always said that he'd love to write. He'd decided to buy himself a typewriter and he would sit down and he'd write the great American novel. What he told me, and his eyes twinkled when he said it, you know, Bob, the most awful thing is, I found I had nothing to say. I think that what he thought was that inspiration came to him like it came to Thackeray. And what he should have known is that none of us have anything to say. We have to sit in front of an empty page, and we have to work, and we have to hope, and we have to dream that something will come. I write in a very different way when I do my cookbooks and my recipes and my articles, is that I sit in front of the empty page and I force myself to write. And I write a few things, then I have it retyped. And then I take a pair of scissors, and I cut it up, and I pin it together in a different order, and then I add to it. And then I forget about it, and I go out and have a marvelous dinner somewhere, and I come back sometimes at 1, 2 in the morning, and I feel marvelous, and I suddenly sit down, and I write 1,000 words. And I think this is what one has to do. One has to leave oneself open to writing. I don't think anything comes to anyone. I think we must slave away at it and work at it.
Well, what we want to do is clean these. Do you see the fingerprints on these? Well, that would never do, huh? Because we want a real sharp gloss on there. And what you want to do is dip that in there, Patrice, and then just wipe it. Come on, try that now. And see that you get every single bit off. And the steam will do it, all the steam coming out of here. And at the same time that he's doing that, I want you to show what we do when plates come out of the washer. Because even that might have a fingerprint on or might have a sort of a dull glow on. What you do is you pour a little tiny bit of vinegar and water on the plate. And then you pour that onto the next plate so that you keep using the same vinegar. And you just shine it up to an absolute sparkling finish so that it's clean. There, you see the difference in that? Look at that. Night and day. You can really see it. Now you go on and do the rest because we've poured a little vinegar down there. So you can go right on with that stack, huh?
It's the backstage work in a restaurant that's the most important. In fact, I often feel that preparations for a meal and rehearsals for a play are exactly the same thing. A good play, you see, is produced with loving attention to every detail. And a good meal demands the same care wherever it's served. I think glasses should be sparkling clean, and silverware clean too, and ashtrays should be changed and never full of old cigarette ends. Flowers should be fresh, and the decor as attractive as we can make it. A table, I think, should be the oasis, a pool of light, a pool of warmth in a room. And in the kitchen, every dish should be made especially for us. I hate those dishes which are cooked a day or two in advance, and I don't like frozen foods in a restaurant, or in my own home, or in anyone else's home for that matter. Taste has always been, since time began, the sense which gives us the most joy because, well, it's rooted in fundamental, irresistible need. And so I think food should be prepared to create the greatest pleasure that we can have. Waiters should know how to set the table for us and to serve our food with the utmost care. And to do this in a restaurant, we rehearse and rehearse, just as if it were theatre.
Now the white wine glass goes in there at an angle of about 45 degrees to the cover as a whole. And if you had any smaller ones, they'd go on right down. Okay? Right. So you should go around. And we would have the candlesticks and the pepper and salt. That's right. Put that dead center. Everything in a line like that so it doesn't interfere with too many people. And salt and pepper here. Okay. That's fantastic.
I suppose it's not surprising that I see running my restaurants in terms of theatre, because that's what I was trained for. My parents didn't approve. They wanted me to go to university, and this is what I was going to do, except along came the war. I was 17 at the time, and I decided why should I go off for 4 years to a university when I was going to have to go into the army eventually anyhow. I thought instead that I'd go off and be an actor. And of course, my mother and father were absolutely furious, and I remember my mother saying, "If you leave this house, never darken my door again." And so I said to her, to sort of call her bluff, "All right, Mother, I won't." And I went off and I lived in New York. And in a year I got on Broadway, where I was an actor, and I was terribly elated because, you know, I'd done it all myself and no one had helped.
Like all young kids in the theatre, I met an awful lot of people. And I suddenly decided that I'd fallen in love with a marvelous girl who was an actress. It worked marvelously well for about 7 months. Then all of a sudden I decided that really this wasn't the right thing at all and that I should break it off. And I didn't know how to break it off because I thought that if you promise great, marvelous things to people, you must live up to them. And I thought the only way would be not to break it off, but to go into the army.
Because I spoke French very well, and because of my German background, I think, I was picked for a special army training program to study for the Office of Strategic Services, our sort of spy outfit. I was taught a lot about France, about its geography, about its history, a lot about its customs, and more about its language. My training for the OSS stood me in good stead because I was called to the London headquarters from active duty in Germany, and I loved England, right from the very start. I vowed spy outfit. I was taught a lot about France, about its geography, about its history, a lot about its customs, and more about its language. My training for the OSS stood me in good stead because I was called to the London headquarters from active duty in Germany, and I loved England, right from the very start. I vowed that one day, when the war was over, I'd come back and live here. And of course I have, and this is where I stay. From the OSS in London, I went on to Paris, and it was there that I got to work so closely with the French and got to know so many French people. And after the war in 1946, I came back here to work with the French radio. I did a series of broadcasts on all aspects of French life, interviews with Jean-Louis Barrault and all the great actors and politicians and restaurateurs of France. And I edited for a year and a half a newspaper for de Gaulle. It was called Spectacle. The idea behind this newspaper was to interest the stars and the directors and the producers, and especially the technicians and the trade people of the French cinema and theatre, in de Gaulle and in his movement. It was the best job I've ever had. We called on all the people who were Gaullistes to give us texts for publication. I remember texts by Claudel and by Gide and by Cocteau, and even Josephine Baker, because she was a heroine, a great heroine of the resistance. Our funds were very limited, and I remember doing the layout myself. And I corrected the text myself, and I used to put the newspaper to bed at night myself. And suddenly de Gaulle decided that we'd done it long enough and that we weren't going to go on doing it. And I sat around waiting for someone to offer me a marvelous job. Well, of course, no one did. And I thought that I, at the age of 25, was a failure, and I stopped all my other work, including the radio. And I went off to my house in the south of France. And I stayed all that summer on the beach. And I stayed, I'm afraid, all winter, drinking and wishing I were more alive and different. It was food that saved me. There was a marvelous friend of mine in Saint-Tropez called Fifine, who runs a restaurant there. She used to say, "Don't stay out too late tonight, Bob, because I want you to come very early to the market tomorrow morning with me. I want you to see the fish market at its very best." And after the market, she'd say, "Come back to the restaurant with me. There'll only be a handful of people there, because it was winter then. I want to show you how to make this marvelous dish." And we'd go back and we'd make some extraordinary bouillabaisse, or we'd make a quenelle out of rascasse, the great fish of the southern coast. Other times we'd go back with tripe and we'd make tripes à la niçoise. I think it was through her that I suddenly got a great taste again for food and for a new kind of life. I think it was in France that I first learned that food meant love, and that even the selection of a perfect apple or a piece of brie or the exact cuts of meat for a pot-au-feu, the freshest butter and the highest quality cream were as important as the way you actually cooked the dish you were going to serve. I used to love the way everyone talked about food, as if it were one of the most important things in life. And of course it is, because each of us eats about 1,000 meals every year. And it's my belief that we should try and make as many of these meals as we can truly memorable. And this is where the French have the advantage of us. They ply their kids with good food and drink as soon as they can take it, with the result that it soon becomes one of their great pleasures in life, and it remains that. To realize this, just think what the phrase "to know how to eat" means on either side of the channel. To the French, it means to be a gastronome, a gourmet. And here, it just means to know how to eat, how to behave at table. People are prepared to go to any lengths to get the fresh foods they want and can afford in France. And of course, French people, and even very simple French people, seem to spend a lot more money for food than we do. And they spend a lot of time and effort on it too, seeing that they have everything they need to eat wonderfully well. And this is Fauchon, perhaps the most marvelous food store in the world, where they have everything from every country that one can think of. Tiny little green finger bananas, wonderful fresh mangoes, fresh coconuts, vegetables such as I've never even seen before and don't even know their uses. Salads, everything that one can want for really exciting cooking. Limes, citron vert, tiny little wild strawberries, morel. Here we are, one of the most exciting mushrooms in the world. Mori, fresh morels. And then great handsome mushrooms, French mushrooms. Tiny, tiny little white button ones of absolute perfection. And then the salads. This is what I really like, mesclun, which first of all I had in Provence. It's a sort of a wild salad, which has a marvelous flavor. Mâche, of course, we have, corn salad. We have radicchio of Treviso, but it's very rare. Hardly ever see it in the markets. Here we have dandelions. Bitter, marvelous taste. I think it adds so much to a salad. Fresh corn, marvelous tiny little green beans, yellow beans, baby artichokes. These just came this morning from Provence, for example, flown up by plane from Nice. Terrifically beautiful.
Je l'apprends faire, oui, aujourd'hui, n'importe où on va.
Ah, tiens, bonjour.
Bonjour, ça va bien, merci.
Vous avez des cailles?
Oui, des très jolies cailles.
The French really are passionately interested in their food. In great shops like Fauchon's, and even in the smaller specialty shops in France, the shopkeepers take a loving interest in the foods that they sell. Not only do they want to produce the highest quality food they can, but they even take a great pleasure in telling you exactly how to cook it.
Quels raisins? Les raisins que vous avez là en boîte? Oui, ou alors du raisin frais, il y en a partout. Raisin frais, c'est mieux. Vous faites un petit jus de raisin, vous les arrosez avec, mettez une petite goutte de kirsch, puis vous les servez au bout de 35 minutes avec des petits raisins autour.
Ah, je vais faire ça, ça a l'air
voilà,
sublime.
vous allez faire ça.
Merci.
Voilà.
I owe a lot to Fifine, really, because without her, I would probably still be drinking gently in my little house in the south of France. She gave me a sort of a new interest in life, and she made me realize that it was time to be serious again and work. I was about 28 by this time, and so I went back to my first love, which was the theater. Theater's always played an enormous part in my life, and perhaps this little theater more than any other,
because here was the first time that I'd really had part of a theatre to play with, to run, to produce plays. We had all the American plays of Paris here. We tried to present the best of all American theatre. We did Irwin Shaw, we did Tennessee Williams, we did Thornton Wilder, we did Our Town by Thornton Wilder. We did a musical, we did Kurt Weill's Knickerbocker Holiday, and that was great fun too. But I think, you know, it had so many problems because this little stage had no flies at the top. And so that, you know, we had to be very limited with our sets and our costumes. Of course, our budget was limited too, so perhaps it wasn't so bad. But I think that one of the greatest experiences I ever had in theater was when I toured Italy with Mario Caratenuto and his troupe. We went to every major town, and this is how I learned Italian, because I was the only American in the troupe. I was the fantasista, they called me. And I remember they had to give me a presentazione, because this was the sort of way they did it in the musicals then. And they decided I would be a cowboy, because he thought I looked very Wild West. I knew I couldn't sing. So we had this huge, huge stage, and I thought of the idea of having real pistols. And so I'd fire the pistols, boom, 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 and then I'd stride down the stage saying, Sono un famoso cowboy, ma sono stanco di buoi. Voglio una grande città con tutte le donne e tutte le novità. For east is east and west is west, and the wrong one I have chose. The wrong one I have chose. I have chose. Ah, signor, buongiorno. Posso vedere un po' qua?
Traveling with Mario Caratenuto and his troupe brought me to every major town in Italy. The restaurants and shops were wonderful. The food was excitingly fresh, a revelation to me. Do you know I can still taste my first ripe figs and raw Parma ham eaten in the sun on a terrace in Rome? Italian food, rustic, simple, hearty and fresh, lacks perhaps the subtlety and glamour of food in France, but it's equally important in Italian family life. And I loved it. And I loved Italy. And I loved the Italians.
Sì, dai sei pezzi.
Visiting Italian friends today reminds me that it was on this very tour that I found again one of the taste sensations of my childhood. For when I was about 12 years old, I became quite friendly with an Italian family who used to live quite near us, the Oranacis, Francesca, her husband Angelo, and her two children, Orlando and Katina. I used to go and have dinner with them occasionally, and of course, they had food that was quite different from ours. And one of my favorites was called pasta vazur. It was a sort of thick, deliciously aromatic dish of pasta and beans. And when I was traveling with the troupe through Italy, I always used to ask, and every time we came to pasta vazur, where's pasta vazur? And finally in Bologna, someone said, I know exactly what you mean, pasta fagioli. And that's what it was. Pasta was the macaroni, and fagioli was the Italian name for a special dried pink bean. Francesca could cook like an angel. It was through her that I learned all about Italian food. She taught me how to roll out wonderfully thin sheets of homemade pasta, cut them into little thin strips for tagliatelle, or cut great sheets of it, and then, with a kind of little pastry wheel, run down it in 2-inch strips, and then cross it like a checkerboard. And in each one of these little sections, she'd put a little teaspoon of finely minced meats and sauce to make a ravioli, and delicious tortellini and brodo.
Non posso aspettare per questo perché c'è molto.
Questo qui è uno speciale.
Bene. Finalmente va a essere molto.
She taught me an awful lot about Italian food, and I've never forgotten it for 30 years. And I think this is what food can do for us. From pasta in Rome to eels in London is quite a jump, gastronomically speaking. My first taste of traditional stewed eels was with my great friend, Islington publican and eel fancier extraordinary, Joe Jenkins.
Meat comes up the bone nicely.
Oh, that's rather good.
Easy to digest. Put wool stamp along your linings, you'll never have an illness in your life.
Well, I better have some more then.
Your wife likes my best, doesn't she?
Oh, lovely. Best in the world.
You were going to say the part about him?
The only trouble here, Bob, they give you more mesh than eels.
I got a lot of eels mine.
Eels are better than love for me. I remember my first love very well, but I remember eels better. Very nice indeed. Remind me of my first sexy kiss. The taste lingers on. And the melody lingers on. And when I bought the engagement ring, I said, if it sparkles like them first eels we had together, it'll last forever, baby.
Joe, you're a poet. I can tell.
No, Bob, it's true. The better they sparkle, the better they are.
And these are really sparkly, aren't they,
They're glistening, kid.
Okay.
And no sunlight on them. Natural glisten.
Do you know what they say about eels? They say that they're an absolute aphrodisiac.
Well, I don't know what that means, Bob, but if it gets stuck in my throat, I'll let you know.
I knew a man who never planned any slap-up meals. So, you know, I asked him to explain the way he feels. But he just said, you can't beat jellied eels. He just said, you can't beat jellied eels. In the upper classes, they fill their glasses, but they only drink in sips. And they eat in style with a knowing smile on sophisticated lips. But don't they ever dream of fish and chips? Don't they ever dream of fish and chips? Now caviar might not go far, and even if it could, you'd soon tire of that desire, at least I know I would. But I won't tire of steak and kidney pud. I won't tire of steak and kidney pud.
I came to England in 1953, just after the Italian tour, to see the coronation, and I stayed on. I was absolutely delighted by the traditional puddings and pies, the rich steak and kidney puddings, and the huge roasts of beef like these. But I thought it was a shame that so little food in England was prepared with any real affection. And there was often no love lost in the serving of it either. A different attitude entirely from the French and Italians, and I couldn't help feeling that I'd like to try and do something about it.
But I think that's beautiful. But we all think that, you know, it's not seeable, it's not buyable, it's not a...
I think probably that's your alternative.
Yes. We picked out the
name in
Robert
white.
Carrier anyway.
I think that answers our thing, but I think it makes it look fussy, because this again is all... It worries me.
What are we arguing about then?
At that time, I wasn't really involved in food professionally. I was working in public relations in London and giving parties and enjoying myself.
Well, what's your objection to that, Bob, having your name?
Well, you know, I like my name, so I like the idea.
Well, I mean, this will help us to sell the book.
I didn't want to ruin the cover.
One of the most important parties for my career as a writer and restaurateur was a dinner party I gave at home for Eileen Dixon, the editor of Harper's Bazaar. It was a sort of a show-off dinner. The only trouble was, one of my guests coming in from Heathrow Airport was over an hour late. In spite of this, the dinner was a great success. And Eileen said, if you can cook like that for 8 people, without any help, with a guest over an hour late, you must be our food editor for life. And that's how I first became Harper's Bazaar's food editor.
That's the trim size, is it?
Yes.
So suddenly it happened, like a bolt out of the blue. A famous magazine, a perfect platform. I could now write about food and entertaining in the way I liked. It was a turning point in my life, a wonderful new outlet for all the experiences I had been enjoying and building up all these years in America, in France, Italy, and Germany. Vogue and the Sunday Times Color magazine followed in quick succession. And then from glossy magazines and mass circulation newspapers, I went on to cookbooks, big luxury cookbooks. And then the fun of cookery cards and menu books, and then more cookbooks, translated now into 9 languages. It's marvelous to think a whole new career was born, thanks to a late guest and a lucky dinner. And my restaurant, too, came about entirely by chance.
I had a Greek couple who worked for me, Yanni and his wife, Stefania. And I wanted to do something rather nice to them because they'd worked for me in the house, cooking, cleaning, watching over the house and watching over me for about 4.5 years. And I remember going down Camden Passage to get a taxi one day with my financial advisor. And we saw this restaurant for sale. And I said, Cyril, if it's cheap enough, get it for me. I'd love to have it. And I took Yanni and Stefania to see it. And we could have moved in that very day. There was mustard in the mustard pots. There were casseroles ready to cook the great stews and dishes. There were dishes and silverware. There were banquettes to sit on. There were tablecloths on the tables. And, of course, Yanni and Stefania were very excited by it and wanted to open practically that minute. But I said, I really want to decorate it first before we open it. Well, that was sort of a setback for them. It was like two children who had their noses pressed against a Christmas window. And then I said I wanted to go away on holiday first and that we wouldn't open until October. Well, that was the last straw. They got angry with me and they went back to Greece. And so I was left with this marvelous restaurant to open.
What would you suggest?
But for first course, I think the aspect of fruits de mer.
I've always felt that one of the most important things about eating, whether entertaining at home or perhaps even more important when choosing a restaurant, is the atmosphere of the place in which we eat. We need to feel reassured, to know that we're welcome there, and to be quickly put at our ease and made to feel happy and comfortable. The atmosphere itself ought to be warm and pleasant. There should be a candle on the table, and the decoration should be attractive without being obtrusive. I think we should be friendly more than stylized. I think restaurants should be as if we'd asked a lot of friends in to help serve the people we like, and the food should feel that way too. Because to feed your neighbor superbly well can give real, lasting happiness. You can, in fact, turn what originally started out as an organic function into a genuine source of delight. And remember, the pleasures of the table are those most likely to prepare for all others.
And the next bedroom to me was...
An enormous amount of really hard work goes into the creation of a good family meal, or one enjoyed in a restaurant. And yet, because the effort involved is unseen, the cook's artistry often goes unrecognized, even though cookery has always affected our own civilization. There are nearly always gastronomic associations with all the major acts of our lives. So I think it's very important that everything that is cooked should be fresh, super fresh, that very day. Each dish should be like a star on the first night, or to make its audience enraptured with it. And every wine should be chosen with extreme care.
Now this would, to my mind, be absolutely right for Camden Passage.
It's quite nice.
It's light, it's a super luncheon, Clarence.
Christopher Pearman is one of the many suppliers who spend so much time and effort in this search for perfection with me.
Now, while we're
It's
in...
almost too good to speak.
Almost too good. Okay, all right. Whilst we're in Bordeaux, Branair. Branair, which...
Branair we know, don't we?
Yes, you do.
But
now,
perhaps not.
I want you to buy some of this and lay it down, Bob. It's one of the most successful vintages, Tappy. This will keep well until the 80s, when, my goodness, and if you're serving a wine like this in the 80s, got a lot of colour, the most beautiful St. Julian nose.
It has, yes.
Now, we could tuck away a few cases in the cellars here for you, for the future.
I think you'd better. I think you'd better.
And this is a little bottle of 47 Branair.
Wonderful.
That's a lovely cork. Look at the length of it. Keeps coming on and on and on. Isn't that lovely?
Yes.
It's fallen absolutely bright and beautiful. All she needs is decanting. Oh, and a nice steady hand this morning, you see? Isn't that lovely? Look at that colour.
I think decanting like this is very important for a wine that's pretty old, isn't it?
Absolutely important. Something so special and fine, you can spoil it in minutes. What a wonderful vintage 47 was.
Yeah.
Where were you?
Well, I think that was the year I was born.
Yes. That is absolutely lovely.
That's
Isn't that beautiful?
Let's have a look
All right,
to that
right,
then.
right. That's right. That's fine. That's absolutely
Jardinier.
lovely.
Un bouquet.
There we
Some of your
are.
hands are trembling. It's 1947 that makes it
Sorry,
do that, is it?
I don't think so. No, my hand's always a little shaky in the morning. Wine as it should be. And this is really what the Medoc is all about, isn't it?
Now, I could drink that, I think, for a bit, no? Perhaps the rest of my life. What do you think, Christopher?
That is absolutely fine. And the wine is still there, and it's still growing, and it is not in any way lazy or tired yet.
Strawberry! Who wants a nice cheap strawberry or cherry? Keep fitting well.
It used to be ripe cherries. It used to be fine plums. It used to be rosy apples.
But now the supermarkets come along, come along. Now the supermarkets come along.
There are all the finest brands, convenient to your hands.
Now that the supermarkets come along.
There's meat wrapped in a tray with the bad side turned away.
Now that the supermarkets come along.
No more costermongers' cries, it's really organized.
Now that the supermarkets come along.
No more dirt, no more waste.
No more flavor, no more taste.
Now that the supermarkets come along. It used to be ripe cherries.
Food should be fun. In fact, it should be one of the greatest pleasures in our life. And yet is it? Because I think where the fun comes is finding terrific, marvelous, fresh foods so that we can improvise with them and so that we can make the most fantastic dishes for the people we like. I'm worried about our diet today because in a market like this, we can find terrific apples, we can find mushrooms, and we can find salads, but we don't get that marvelous variety that we got at one time in the past in this country, and which we still get in France and in Italy and in Mediterranean countries. Do you remember the markets that we saw on the Rue Mouffetard? They were full of everything, every single kind of cheese, every single kind of fish, every single kind of shellfish. Fish here. Contrast this with what we saw in Paris. Here we have some squid, we've got some Scotch salmon and some red mullet, but I'm afraid that red mullet has been frozen, so it's not going to be the same. Now here's a terrific stall because we've got baby green peppers and we've got marvelous green beans from France. Now these are really superfine green beans of very, very good quality. And we've got fennel, we've got green peppers, we've got all the garlic we want, we've got fresh herbs, but again we have tomatoes. Now these are from Morocco, which are terrific. They're very wet and juicy, but unfortunately on our street markets today, they're not always of the best quality. And I think it's a shame. How could one make a wonderful salad out of a tomato like that? Here are little tomatoes that we're so used to here in England, all graded for size, I'm afraid, more than for flavor. And the same with our cucumbers, all plastic wrapped so they stay forever in a pristine condition. But again, where's the flavor? I'm very worried about this lack of fresh foods. Because I think if we're all eating frozen peas and we're eating TV dinners and we're eating fish that's been on ice or frozen for many weeks, it's going to affect our health first of all. And it's going to affect our mental stability. And it's also going to affect our libido. All of this is important to our life, and we must go back to this freshness in our foods, and we must look for the quality, because that's the only way that we will have a full and a rich and a perfect life.
Fresh vegetables, of course, are a necessity for a full life. They give us much-needed vitamins and minerals. And leisured meals are of great importance, too. They relax the mind while they feed our bodies, and they add quality to our manner of living. In fact, the ancients made great claims for the benefits that could be derived from fresh foods from the earth and from the sea. Aphrodisiac powers have been ascribed to crabs, caviar, crayfish tails, shark fin soup, in fact anything from eels to eggs, and lots of the sauces, herbs and spices that we eat today have had aphrodisiac claims made for them. From the time of Horace, writers and doctors have been holding forth on the magic, loving qualities of the foods we eat. Since time immemorial, food has meant love.
We want this marvelously hot. It's kind of sad. And what it is, it's an egg, which of course is the symbol of fertility. Hollowed out, coddled first and hollowed out, the white poured off, so that we just have the yolk in there. We're going to make a sauce of the yolk because we're going to flame it in vodka. And on top of that is caviar, which of course is the greatest aphrodisiac, Susan, in the entire world.
Can I have a lot, please?
Eggs with caviar and vodka flamed. Begin to rouse the passions as yet untamed. And if you're in the mood for love, offer her the food of love. You can kindle love light in her eyes with oysters poached in oriental spice, and the two of you can learn new tricks when you try to eat them with chopsticks. And if you're in the mood for love, offer her the food of love. Rice pilaf and foie gras will combine with chicken and pistachio and pine, and baked within exotic pastry birds. They say much more than you can say in words. And if you're in the mood for love, offer her the food of love. In trying to eat the sweet asparagus, she tends to lose all feelings of mistrust, for she can hardly still remain straight-laced, with butter melted on her hands and face. If you're in the mood for love, offer her the food of love. Sweet that's brushed with caramel, it weaves an irresistible romantic spell. But just in case the mood should ever wane, your glasses should be charged with rye champagne. And if you're in the mood for love, offer her the food of